Turn of events, Russian President Vladimir Putin has agreed to a 30-day halt on attacks targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure, following a high-stakes phone call with U.S. President Donald Trump. However, Putin refused to commit to a full ceasefire, leaving the possibility of further hostilities on the table. The phone conversation between the two leaders, which lasted for over 2.5 hours, was described by Trump as very good and productive. He took to his Truth Social platform stating, "We agreed to an immediate ceasefire on all energy and infrastructure, with an understanding that we will work quickly towards a complete ceasefire and ultimately bring an end to this horrible war between Russia and Ukraine." Ukraine's response. Waiting for clarity, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky responded cautiously to the news, stating that Ukraine supports the idea of halting attacks on infrastructure, but is awaiting further details on the agreement. Speaking to journalists, Zelensky emphasized that discussions with the U.S. are crucial before making a formal response. "In many regions, we can clearly hear what Russia wants," Zelensky said, referencing continued Russian strikes despite the announced ceasefire. Within hours of the call ending, air raid sirens blared in Kyiv, and explosions were reported as Ukrainian forces intercepted Russian drones. Meanwhile, a Russian drone strike reportedly hit a hospital in Sumy, further complicating hopes for...
Including the requirement that Kyiv must stop receiving foreign military aid and intelligence and end military mobilization. Mr. Putin did say, however, he was willing to pause attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, but 80% of it has already been destroyed by Russian bombs. This evening, President Zelensky said it's clear Russia isn't ready to end this war. The whole game is to weaken Ukraine. We'll be live in Kyiv, but first...
Kremlin statement. Putin's willingness to halt strikes on Ukraine's power grid comes with conditions. Western nations must immediately stop all military aid to Kyiv. This demand is seen as a major roadblock to achieving a broader ceasefire. During an interview with Fox News' Laura Ingraham, Trump downplayed reports that aid to Ukraine was a point of discussion. "No, we didn't talk about aid, actually. We talked about a lot of things, but aid was never discussed," he insisted. However, analysts believe that Putin's demands indicate his long-term strategy of weakening Ukraine by cutting off its support from the West. Despite Trump's optimistic tone, experts warn that Russia's proposal may be an attempt to pressure Ukraine and its allies into an unfavorable deal. Russia's military advantage and strategic goals. In the interview, Trump acknowledged Russia's military advantage, stating, "Right now, you have a lot of guns pointing at each other, and a ceasefire without going a little bit further would have been tough. Russia has the advantage. As you know, they have encircled about 2,500 soldiers. They are nicely encircled, and that's not good. And we want to get it over with." Putin reportedly reiterated his concerns over several issues, including how a ceasefire would be enforced, and whether it would allow Ukraine to regroup and strengthen its military with further Western assistance. This indicates that Russia still sees military pressure as a key negotiating tool. Next steps: ceasefire negotiations, to begin immediately. A White House statement confirmed that Washington and Moscow have also agreed to start negotiations on a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea and a broader, permanent peace. These talks are set to begin immediately in the Middle East. While this development marks the first partial ceasefire in over 3 years since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, experts remain skeptical about its long-term impact. With continued attacks reported despite the agreement, questions linger over whether Putin's offer is genuine or simply another strategic move in the ongoing war. For now, Ukraine and its allies remain cautious, waiting to see whether this limited truce holds or if it's merely a temporary pause before further escalations. Stay tuned for updates as the situation unfolds. Vladimir Putin have held crucial talks on a potential ceasefire in Ukraine. But has peace truly come within reach? Or is this just another strategic maneuver? Let's break it down. During the call, President Trump reportedly pushed for a 30-day ceasefire, encompassing land, sea, and air, with Ukraine already having signed onto the initiative. However, instead of a definitive agreement, Putin presented a set of demands that seemed to tilt negotiations heavily in Russia's favor. According to the Kremlin, one of Putin's primary conditions for a lasting ceasefire is the complete suspensions of Western military aid and intelligence support to Ukraine. He also demanded a halt to Ukraine's recruitment efforts, calling these steps key conditions for political and diplomatic resolution. This is a significant move by Russia. By cutting off Western aid, Putin aims to weaken Ukraine's defense capabilities while maintaining Moscow's territorial gains. If accepted, it would drastically shift the balance of power.
Дотиснути щодо деталей і не бити по енергетиці і по морю. Якщо такий перший крок, а поки що інших кроків немає, то нехай розкаже тоді деталі, як ми будемо це робити. І я впевнений, що всі наші сторони, принаймні американська і українська сторона, буде підтримувати будь-які кроки, які ведуть до зменшення ударів і по військовим, і по цивільній інфраструктурі. Тобто ми ж під...
Western allies have reacted with skepticism. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and French President Emmanuel Macron emphasized that any peace deal must involve Ukraine directly. Meanwhile, Downing Street cautiously welcomed Trump's diplomatic push but reiterated the need for a just and lasting peace. Zelensky. Putin has effectively rejected the proposal for a full ceasefire. His demands aim to prolong the war and weaken Ukraine further. The world must respond decisively. We are exploring all avenues for peace. However, any agreement must respect Ukraine's sovereignty and security. The U.S. will continue working with allies to ensure a fair resolution. Trump's approach here is reminiscent of past deals he's attempted, seeking quick wins and grand gestures. But Putin's demands make it clear that Russia sees this as an opportunity to secure long-term strategic advantages. The question is, will Trump push back or concede? With diplomatic tensions high and battlefield realities unchanged, the world watches to see if this ceasefire proposal will lead to peace, or simply another phase in a prolonged conflict. We'll keep you updated as the situation unfolds. Stay with us for more breaking news. We're now getting lines from Reuters with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's reaction to the Trump-Putin call. Zelensky said Ukraine would support a U.S. proposal to stop strikes on Russian energy infrastructure, and said he hoped to speak to U.S. President Donald Trump about his talks with Vladimir Putin. The White House said earlier that Putin and Trump agreed during a phone call to a limited 30-day ceasefire on energy infrastructure targets, and that talks aimed at moving toward a broader peace plan would begin immediately. Zelensky told reporters during an online briefing, "I think it will be right that we will have a conversation with President Trump, and we will know in detail what the Russians offered the Americans, or what the Americans